Welcome back. Build Zimbabwe leader Dr. Noah Manyika will be launching the party's manifesto on the 27th of January. And this comes at a time the parties are also trying to make a mark in the 2018 elections. The manifesto will be launched at the Highfield Zimbabwe grounds in the capital next Saturday, and the party has started circulating flyers on social media to publicize the event, which will last the whole day. And to discuss the matters further, we are joined by Dr. Noah Manyika, President of the Build Zimbabwe Alliance. A very warm welcome to you, sir, and thank you so much for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to be here.
And what are the main features of your manifesto?
So you can divide our manifesto into two. The first part is talking about the importance of developing a unique social contract. And as you can imagine, in the past 37 years, there's been so much that has happened in our country to divide us. There has been a lot of emphasis on some people who are entitled to participate in the building of our country, in determining the future of our country, and the de-emphasis on certain other people kind of being disqualified from participating actively in building our country. So the very first thing is building a unique social contract. And that unique social contract must actually make it possible for every single Zimbabwean to actively and fully participate in determining the future of our country and rebuilding it. And the second part of our manifesto, before we even talk about those technical side, which is our 10-point plan, obviously the foundation is the social contract. And then we have things that we want to do, like reducing the size of government. I mean, we have a horrendously huge bureaucracy in Zimbabwe, and we have actually said one of our 10 points actually is that we're going to cut the size of the executive from 30-something ministers to 15. And we're going to make that a constitutional requirement that government is not unnecessarily expanded to accommodate people on the basis of patronage. And then I would just mention a couple of others in our 10-point plan. There is no way that you can rebuild the economy for our country unless you actually resuscitate provincial economies. If the economy of Lawa, if the economy of Masvingo, if the economy of Mutare is actually not resuscitated and developed, then we cannot really talk about rebuilding the economy for our country. So we have a very, very focused plan to resuscitate provincial economies. And then one of the things that excites me is the idea of devolving the presidency, making sure that the president is the president of every province and requiring that he takes up a week's residency in each of the provinces per month so that we can focus development in those provinces and show out the things that may not even be adequate facilities and so on to make sure that those provincial economies can hum. So those are some of the things in our 10-point plan.
There's a point that you mentioned there. You were talking about there is a division within Zimbabwe. What would you like to say to all Zimbabweans who are watching right now? They are, of course, scattered across the continent. Those who belong to different political parties in Zimbabwe, what would you like to say?
We have a historic moment in 2018, really historic moment. And I think we must come to the understanding that where we are today as a country is not where we should be. $16 billion GDP is not really where we should be 40 years after independence. And it's really high time that each and every one of us became determined to participate in determining the future of our country. One of the things that kind of is disheartening after what happened recently in Zimbabwe is how some people are saying, oh, you know what, it's done now. We have arrived. No, we haven't arrived. There are still people who live in Heathcliff. We haven't had water running through their taps for 16 years. There are still people in the rural areas who are still using Blair toilets. There are people who are not able to finish building their homes because they can't access their pensions and stuff like that. So the situation hasn't ended. And I think that these almost their moments that we celebrate in African politics. It's really, really a shame. So we want to make sure that every Zimbabwean can become excited about registering to vote. In the next few weeks, up to the first week of February, the registration process is going to be happening. But we want to make sure they register to vote. And then they actually vote. And as they're exercising their right to vote, it has to be, they have to look at the parties that are there and ask themselves these questions. Is this political party, are these leaders going to build an economy that works for me? That is the question that people need to ask. If you're a vendor, you have to ask yourself, are these people going to build an economy that enables me maybe to expand my business? If you're an artisanal miner, Are these people going to build an economy that helps me build up my business so I can actually get into the formal sector? Those are the tough questions that every Zimbabwean must ask. And if you're outside in the diaspora, you have a vested interest in making the Zimbabwean economy work, because there are a lot of families that have been separated because of the economic situation, husbands and wives in different places because of the unemployment situation in our country. 90% unemployment is not a joke. So you have a vested interest in making sure that we have the right leaders. Now, I think a lot of times people focus on the presidency and people focus on the executive. But what we're calling for is the Build Zimbabwe Alliance is a top-to-bottom leadership renewal. Because the person who determines whether you have water is not your MP, is the councillor in your community. And we are saying, take a serious look at those people who say they're running for council office and cast your vote right. So that's the most important message right now to Zimbabweans.
And you touched on participation. How can the party really tackle that? Is that not going to be a challenge for the party to get everyone involved in the voting process?
No, you know what? The interesting thing about this is that I get asked this question. For instance, some people will frame this question: "What are your chances?" You know, and stuff like that. But the issue is, we all need to work hard to mobilize Zimbabweans to register to vote, you know, to exercise their duty as a citizen, you know, and it comes out of hard work from everybody.
And as a party, have you been recruiting people?
Absolutely, we have been. And it will be interesting to see what happens on the 27th. I think people are going to come and it will surprise a lot of people.
You're saying that you have been recruiting, of course, people, but now what makes Build Zimbabwe Alliance a unique political party from other existing political parties in Zimbabwe?
Well, you know, I love that question, by the way. I think the whole idea that we want everybody to participate, if you look at our name, for instance, we're called the Build Zimbabwe Alliance for a reason. A lot of people then took that alliance thing and appended it to all their efforts to come together as political parties. But what we're saying is the Build Zimbabwe Alliance is that we want an alliance with the people. We want people who don't necessarily think in a partisan way, but they're thinking in terms of developing the country to have a common platform where they can work together for the good of the country. And that's really what makes us unique. If you look at some of the things that we've been putting out there online, we're not preoccupied with calling people names and things like that. I don't think that that's what Zimbabwe needs right now. What Zimbabwe needs is a political party and leaders who are going to be appealing to their highest qualities and saying, come out there and let's do something to build our great country. And I really believe that in short order, if we do that as a nation, Zimbabwe will be a great country, not just in terms of Africa, but in terms of the world.
You talk about coming together as Zimbabweans. What are your views on coalition politics in Zimbabwe? Do you see that becoming a reality in the days to come in the country?
Well, as you get closer to the election, a lot of things can happen. But, you know, one of the things that we decided to do is to honor the Zimbabwean people by putting out our manifesto, telling the Zimbabwean people exactly what our plans are. And I think that it's kind of short-cutting, you know, shortchanging the Zimbabwean people if you rush to coalitions, but you haven't really specified to people what it is that you're going to do. So, you know, we've put this out there, and, you know, we await the other political parties to see exactly what they're offering. And who knows what happens as we go down towards the election. But, you know, our focus is to mobilize the Zimbabwean to register to vote and to vote on election day. That's the most important thing. You know, all this idea of deciding we're coming together and divvying out political positions and so on, that's not going to change our country. You know, that's not going to triple our GDP by 2023 or create a $100 billion economy by 2028. So, you know, we are very, very focused on mobilizing Zimbabweans to register to vote and to vote.
And talking about mobilization, we know that everybody is scattered across the continent, of course, and we know that there are also people living in South Africa, and we see that they are comfortable at the moment, and some of them have said that they're not yet ready to go back home and help out with rebuilding. How will you be able to channel them back to Zimbabwe to help rebuild the country, as you're saying this alliance is about rebuilding?
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting because we get a different perspective. You know, obviously there are some people who would say, you know, I have a good job here, my kids are going to good schools, you know, I'm set. But we're also getting a huge number of people who are saying we want to go back home. You know, one of the interesting things is one of the videos that we put out there, which talks about that. You know, that Zimbabwe is your home. Is the highest viewership, over 400,000 views on Facebook for a reason, because there's a yearning that people have to actually go back home. And you know what? One of the things that is really, really important for African leaders to understand is people's economic behavior. If things are not working in your home country, people are going to find another place of refuge, you know. So we've got to make Zimbabwe work. That's the most important thing. You know, we've got to make sure that when people come into Zimbabwe, and for instance, right now, if somebody wants to send someone money to Zimbabwe and want to do a transfer from the United States and so on, the bank will say, well, you know, you can't do that. You know, I mean, it's crazy. If somebody wants to withdraw money from their own bank account, they cannot get that money to pay tuition for their children's school fees. So you've got to make the country work. And the responsibility of leaders is to make the country work. You can't just say to people, go back home, you know. But you can also say to people, participate in the process of rebuilding the country. So here's one of the things that I'm calling for. You know, the diaspora vote is something that needs to happen. People need to be allowed to vote. And this idea by the government that, you know, it's a difficult thing to accomplish is ridiculous. When you go to a registration center right now, there's somebody sitting there with a computer taking your fingerprints and writing your details and so on, and then it is saved onto a little thingy, hard drive. It's not even on hard drive. At these little registration centers, they're saving it on USB, right? That's not difficult to do. It's not difficult to actually set up an embassy in the United States as a registration center or even as a polling station. It's not difficult to do that here in South Africa. And this whole idea that there's no money, you know, you always hear this because somebody is sitting there and they're thinking, well, somebody is going to come up with a huge budget. Maybe some of these European countries and Americans are going to provide a huge amount of money and I'm going to get my big cut. Look, it's important for Zimbabweans to be allowed to vote. It's important for a government that is serious, particularly this government that has come in, if it is serious about leveling the playing field, to make sure that Zimbabweans are allowed to vote everywhere.
And now we spoke about how comfortable people are and they have a good school, their children are in good schools and all of that. But now looking at the 90% of unemployment that is currently in Zimbabwe, that has hit Zimbabwe, I'm wondering what are the plans that are in place in terms of unemployment in the country? Yeah,
well, you know, we have a huge problem, and this is one of the reasons why it's very important to emphasize the development of a unique social contract where we as Zimbabweans actually say we are going to work together to rebuild our country. That's really critical, because the things that we are facing in Zimbabwe, you know, it's huge. 90% unemployment, 70% of our population living under the poverty datum line. That's not a joke. You know, that's very, very serious stuff. And our industrialization capacity has gone down to something like 20% and so on. So you're talking about really an uphill struggle. But also remember that as a result, a lot of Zimbabweans are very enterprising. A lot of people are in the informal sector. It's not like they are not doing anything. Those that have left the country, there are people who are making window frames, doors, and so on at marketplaces. Very, very skilled people. The important thing for any new government is to find ways to capacitate these people to move them from the informal sector into the formal sector. It's very, very important. And one of the things that we're calling for is almost a $1 billion fund split between supporting people who are doing artisanal mining and who are in the informal sector, and some young people giving them an innovation fund so that some of their ideas can actually be turned into jobs and so on. So it's not easy. The combination of that and bringing in partnerships from outside is very, very critical. Making sure that companies can invest in Zimbabwe and so on. But there we also have to be very, very careful, because the assumption a lot of times these days is that if a company comes to invest in your country, they are going to create an unlimited number of jobs. We know that in the 21st century, you know, companies don't make more money because they have a lot of employees. They utilize technology and so on and so on. So you have to be very, very careful about the investment that you bring into the country. The other thing that's also important to talk about is, you know, look at a pre-independence Zimbabwe. When a resource was discovered, an economy was built around it. So in Shirugwi, when chrome was discovered, the whole town was built around that. Go to post-independence Zimbabwe. We discovered diamonds in Chiadzwa. There's no economy which was built around the diamonds. And this shows you that the provincial structures are weak and they are not demanding of central government that whatever investment is made in their province should actually benefit the people there. So,
unfortunately, Doctor, I have run out of time, but it was very nice having you in studio and just giving us more details on that. We were joined in studio by Dr. Noah Manyika, Build Zimbabwe Alliance president of that party there. And right now,